In this section I want to talk to you briefly about how you can make best use of the TSP classes as a learner, because they're not organised and presented in a way that you might be used to. Let's start by looking at what tester skills are. Some people who don't know anything about testing might think testing is about bashing keyboards or punching buttons, and it isn't. We know this. Testing is mostly about thinking, questioning and thinking again. We think about the problem, the question we're trying to answer. We ask the question, we do our testing, we challenge requirements, we challenge the system under test. And when we get evidence from our tests, we think again. We consider what we've learned and what we do next and how we can make progress in our projects. So thinking, questioning are the most important tester skills. Now, in the course of the classes, you will learn some logistical skills about how testing actually works. But logistics are different in every organisation. So I want to suggest that logistics are the things that you'll most likely learn at your place of work. So when you want to know how things are done, we suggest that you ask your manager or your colleagues and learn from them. You'll learn logistics at your place of work rather than through a classroom or in an online training course. Now, two areas of skills are absolutely fundamental to making progress as a tester. These foundational or critical skills are partly about thinking, but also about personal, team or business skills, you could say. So with regards to thinking, we strongly urge you to consider the critical thinking aspect, systems thinking and modelling. These are the three main thinking tools that you have that will help you make progress as a tester. But also, you need to operate in the context of your business. So part of testing is having very good communication and collaboration skills. Certainly, as you learn how to do your job over time, you'll want to improve either your own performance or the performance of your team. And so process improvement is part of the skills set that you need to make progress. Risk management is also perceived to be a senior management kind of concern, but actually you're working with risks at a lower level, but you're still doing risk management. So these are the sort of things that you'll have to pick up over the course of the classes in the foundation course, of course. Now, our focus of the skills is we've suggested that the certification scheme isn't in competition with what we're doing here. There's very little overlap with ISTQB, for example. We're focusing on non-logistics. So we're focusing on the skills required to make choices rather than giving you a choice and forcing you down a particular path. Now, most importantly, testers tend to work as part of a mixed multidisciplinary team. So we're encouraging, just like business is encouraging, testers and all practitioners in project teams to be more outward-facing, collaborative and proactive, to think for yourself. So the goal of the classes here are to enable you to understand why collaboration works and how you make good use of collaboration in order to make progress. And you need to be more outward-facing, a little bit more extrovert, and that might not come so naturally if you're a kind of an introverted personality. Certainly you need to be a little bit more proactive to make progress. So this is what we're trying to encourage in your behaviours, if you like. We're also trying to support testers who work in teams that are using pervasive automation. So a lot of the checking is done by tools. So where project teams use tools to build environments, to build the application under tests and deploy it in an environment, and then to run tests. These change the game, if you like, for testers. So we're trying to encourage you to be able to think your way through the challenge of dealing with automation. Another angle to this is that we seem to be moving as an industry away from stage processes like waterfall and towards more event-driven processes. Things that it's all action, very dynamic. Every day is different. There's no kind of stasis or stability almost in our projects, in that every project is a new adventure almost. Now, the other thing is to say overall that our argument is that testing is much more than just finding bugs. It has a broader role of assurance, a broader role than just testing software. We want to suggest that testers get involved through requirement stage to challenge requirements and improve requirements, right through to deployment and customer experience optimization, this idea of CXO, where we use the knowledge and monitoring and logging in production to influence our next phase of development in our systems. Now, the other thing we're trying to do is to encourage you to behave a little differently than the traditional tester. We're encouraging you to think more analytically, and this is where the modelling, systems thinking, critical thinking comes in. To think for yourself, on your feet, to make choices that are meaningful in the context of your projects. We're encouraging you to move from being passive and having requirements thrown at you and for you to worry and be concerned they're not very good, to actually challenge and refine requirements, to take an active role in improving the understanding of requirements. To understand production monitoring, logging and analytics that influence further development but also influence testing. And you have to align testing perhaps to these models. And the other kind of change in behaviour is to act more proactively as a pathfinder to help developers find their way through testing of complex code, or to be like a navigator in projects to help people, to guide people and the project to a safe place. This is very different from the stereotypical tester who has poor quality software dumped on them and they treat themselves as victims. We're definitely trying to move away from that kind of mentality. And the other angle, of course, is that we're trying to suggest that you have to operate at a low level, perhaps a technical level, but also speak to senior business and stakeholders because you're supporting their decision making. So what we do as testers is we're trying to gather information to increase our understanding of the definition, the requirements of software, and also the delivery. What has actually been delivered? Does it do the job our stakeholders require of it? So TSP is challenging you to think for yourself. And the goal of TSP is not just to stop and give you a basic foundation. It's to suggest that you can excel in your craft if you use these thinking skills and think for yourself and make your own choices. And by so doing, you'll be able to teach others to excel too, to act as a coach, mentor to other people. Now, as part of the class, we offer exercises and assignments, and after every section, we suggest there's some things, some further work you can do. So things to think about or further study, and make some suggestions there. We ask that you take them seriously. They're designed to help you assimilate the concepts and techniques we're trying to present in the classes. Now, if you do get stuck, use the support tab on the class pages to send us a question or ask for assistance. The course doesn't answer every question in your mind. It can't possibly do that. So if you do have a query, just take a little time to ask the question on the support tab, and we'll do our best to respond quickly. Potentially the class will have to be improved to answer the question, or maybe we'll add some frequently asked questions and answers to the content. Now, one of the things about training is quite often is people go on training courses and they come back to work and then nothing applies to their current environment. So one of the things that we're encouraging you to do is to consider in the things to think about and further study assignments, things to consider how what you've just learnt through the class applies in your current project or application under test. And we strongly suggest you keep in touch with your manager or someone else on your team who is coaching or mentoring you to help you to understand how what you're learning applies in the context of your current project. So it's a very good idea to keep a manager in particular up to date with progress and use them as a consultant, use them as a source of knowledge, certainly listen to their guidance as they can help you to apply your knowledge in the context of your current assignments. Now, one of the fundamentals of testing is that testing is very much about gathering information to answer questions, and sometimes it's a big question like, are we safe to release into production the whole system? That's the big question. But also it might be a tiny question where we're looking at a particular component, a few lines of code, and we need to test to demonstrate that a component operates correctly. We ask questions at the lowest level right through to the highest level. So don't be afraid of asking questions, and particularly your colleagues and manager. So, for example, you might want to know, well, why do we work this way rather than that way? Because there's a choice there. How did we end up making this choice of approach? What happens when, for example, the developers ship late? What happens when there are severity 1 defects in the system the day before we are aiming to go live? Who is responsible for making these decisions or those decisions? Can you help me in this area by introducing me to an expert? And so on. These are the kind of questions that we encourage you to ask of your teammates and your managers. Above all, we're encouraging you to be curious and be inquisitive and not to be embarrassed or shy about that. We definitely want you to get into the game of being more interactive with your teammates and to help through collaboration to make your projects a success.